To the contrary, carried. Thank you very much. Right. We now move to item number 10, Council-controlled organisation reform. Before I introduce this item, I just want to begin by acknowledging the hard-working staff across the group. I understand it's a little bit unsettling for you, but I want us to provide today certainty by making decisions that are clear and purposeful. And once these decisions are made, we will need your skills and knowledge, still, whatever the scope of the reform might be. Do we have David Taipari here?
Yes, he's online.
I just want to acknowledge that we've got David Taipari from Hukura, the Independent Maori Statutory Board, here online, given their representative support for this item in the Budget Committee and a desire to participate in the discussion with speaking rights only. Welcome, David. I'll move this.
Your worship.
Yeah, thank you. I'll move this and the Deputy Mayor will second it. Okay, my proposal and recommendations, councillors. The report in front of you relates to CCO reform and my intention to address concerns with the current model. The problem I want to fix is simple. Despite progress on various CCO reviews over the years, challenges with the CCO model persist, including concerns about public trust and confidence, strategic misalignment, ineffective democratic accountability, cost effectiveness, and duplication of services. At the beginning of this process, we asked staff for advice and options to address those issues. We've also asked if we're in the best position to deliver on our long-term plan and its broader vision. Based on the staff analysis, it is clear to me that further tinkering won't cut it. If we want to fix those issues and deliver on our commitments to Auckland, we must change the model itself. The case for transport reform has been made to central government. They agree that Auckland deserves better from its transport system and will change the legislation to allow us to get on with the job. Since the announcement, I've had only had positive comments from Aucklanders. They want this, and we will give it to them. My proposal to integrate functions like property management, urban regeneration, economic development and transport planning with Council's planning, policy and strategic functions will enable people with similar skills and experience to work closer together. I've heard concerns that urban design expertise doesn't exist within Council, but this was a result of removing the design office from Council and pushing it away from us, and I want it to come back. By bringing expertise in-house, we can get rid of silos and an environment where problems are shifted from one organisation to another. We will do more and be more solutions focused. This kind of integration will support us to better direct and prioritise investment, minimising duplication and the unnecessary cost that comes to both Council and to also those who we service with additional layers of bureaucracy. Ultimately, this is about getting more from what we already have, being smarter with ratepayer dollars. Strong public service is integrated and coordinated. It responds to the needs and directions of its communities. It makes the most of its size, function and role to influence growth, development and productivity, and it is strategic with how it invests public money. Accountability is critical too. Around this table, we are all held accountable for the decisions CCOs make. I hear about it from Aucklanders all the time, but we're not responsible for most of those decisions, which often lead us into a blame game that never addresses the actual problem. If we're accountable for the outcome of those decisions, I want us to be responsible for making those decisions. Now's our chance to fix things, not to hide from tough decisions that are currently kept at arm's length from democracy. I want Aucklanders to have a clear understanding of what we do and why. I want them to have faith in the way we invest ratepayers' dollars. I want them to rebuild their trust and confidence by being accountable to them. And I want our organisations to be set up in a way that allows us to be closer to them. That is where I want us to be. So on to the process. I've reflected on the management of previous meetings. As a result, I want us to allow all members to speak once question time is over. At this time, you will all be provided with the opportunity to address the CCO reform package in its entirety. This is your right, and I respect that you all wish to share your views. Please try not to interrupt colleagues when they're speaking. While we often disagree, we can do so respectfully. I'd also like you to indicate now if you have any intention of making amendments, and for those to be provided in writing so that they can be shared with the full committee. This will allow members to ask questions of staff while they're seated at the table. That way we can understand any implications before we get to debate and avoid the awkwardness of staff having to be dragged back to the table after question time. Please do these by sending them to Phil and Sandra with an R. Finally, if and when we get to decision making on the substantive, you will be asked to consider the reform package in full when voting. This is a package and must be considered together. Of course, you're welcome to record your dissent against individual components, similar to how we approach other big decisions like the long-term plan. So Phil, I'm going to hand it over to you. Then we can move into question time.
Well, point of order, Chair, if I may, and I'm sorry to be a bit pedantic here, and whilst I agree with the tenor of what you've said, standing orders do provide, if somebody wishes to raise a closure motion, even if you don't think that people should be constrained, standing orders do provide for closure motions. I hear what you've said and I agree with it. I think the best you could suggest at this stage is that you're indicating through your contribution just now that you wouldn't support a closure motion if it were put. In other words, there's nothing to prevent people from trying to do that, although I don't think they should. But in the event that they do, you would be comfortable to support debate continuing until everybody has had their say.
I'm quite happy to not support one, provided it's before 7 o'clock tonight at that stage. I mean, there is a... I think with 7 hours is plenty of time to discuss things. So, but I get your point. I'm hoping we're not going to get to that. All right. And if it does come up, I'll chat to you before I do anything. I don't want to support one. I don't want to hear one. I'm hoping we have a good grown-up day. But thank you very much for raising that, and I accept the point you're making. I'll ask Phil to provide us the CEO's input.
Thank you, Your Worship. Kia ora, councillors. I'm going to take I know this is a little bit unusual, but I'm going to take a few minutes at the start of this before we proceed to questions and debate. I think that's important in terms of framing this a little bit from a sort of management and operational perspective. It's clear that the matters in front of you have a very direct bearing on our group structure and some of the functions within CCOs, but also some of the related functions within the council parent organisation. It follows that there is significant staff interest, and it doesn't escape me that there's likely to be a number of potentially affected staff and leaders watching this discussion. As a bit of an aside, I'd just appeal to you to be mindful of that as the discussion progresses. To those staff and actually our delivery partners who work on our behalf with the CCOs in the functions that we're discussing today, it's important we're clear that this is not actually about whether a good job has been done. I think we would all agree that there are genuinely positive attributes in relation to CCOs, and some very good work has been done that we want to preserve in any transition in the event that you choose to make changes in the structure. I know that, but I also know that elected members understand that across the council family we've got a lot of very diligent and hardworking and effective staff. This is about our operating model and where functions sit in the structure to give best effect to the strategic intent and policy direction of the council. Simple as that. Structures, of course, are important alongside the culture that we build, the commitment that we have to collaboration and working across boundaries, how we can be most effective in terms of achieving the outcomes for the community that you set out. It's not for me to speak in favour of the Mayor's proposal. That's his job and for his office today. What I would say, though, is that whatever you decide, you know, it needs to be guided by that commitment to make change that preserves, you know, our pursuit of successful outcomes for the city. Frankly, I would like us to knock on the head once and for all some of the unhelpful narrative about CCOs. It's frankly unhelpful and slightly destructive. So if we do nothing else today, whether CCOs continue in relation to some of the functions that are under discussion or whether they come inside the organisation, you know, I want for everyone's sake to try and put this to bed for a period of time and kill some of the unhelpful narrative. Now, I know from the questions that I've had from councillors that there is an interest in what, you know, how will this be managed going forward? What will the transition look like? So I just want to talk to the future. It is true, and I've said this to you in a workshop situation, it's true that we don't yet have all of the answers we need in the event that you decide to proceed with the Mayor's proposal. That's actually okay and quite proper. As I've said to you, it makes sense that detail in terms of organisation design and transition follows this once we understand your direction. Today. What I can say, however, is, and particularly to the people who are potentially affected by this change, is that it's not about retrenchment. If you proceed, there may be some small efficiencies. We should always pursue those, but actually we are still going to want real strength and focus and talent and expertise in terms of events and property management and development and economic development and urban regeneration and transport policy strategy, government relations and so forth. That stuff will be designed into whatever we proceed with going forward. I will say that I think regardless of whether you proceed with the changes that the Mayor is suggesting, there are genuine opportunities to better align and integrate certain functions, be they property related, where we have fragmentation across the group in terms of property expertise, be they economic development related, be they in terms of transport and infrastructure and the multiple areas that are involved overall in the process of development and infrastructure deployment in the region. Frankly, regardless of whether you make changes today, we've got to keep working on maximising the effectiveness of our spend and supporting sustainably that sort of growth and development and achieving economic and social outcomes along the way that make those areas sustainable. As for timeframes, it is critical that we respect our employment relations and contractual obligations. So I'm committed to working through this with the CCO chief executives and staff and their representatives. bringing to you a draft design with a bit more detail than what you've been supplied with thus far. And it's pretty robust, to be honest, for where we are in this process, the material that you've been supplied with. But there is a level of detail that we would want to bring back to you by the end of February. And then actually it's important you understand that to fulfil obligations, we need to go into formal consultation with affected staff at that point. As for the extent of change, frankly, you should not have any doubt that we can do this thoughtfully and properly. The scale of it's manageable. It's in the region of about 3% of our total workforce who are materially affected by the changes in the Mayor's proposal. And I don't say that to minimise the importance of this. These are critical and important functions that need to be transitioned well, and with a view to retaining the talent and having people not just with a job at the end of this, but feeling valued and part of whatever the machinery looks like going forward. And there is, and I acknowledge, a sense of identity and loyalty that people have to the existing CCO organisations that we've got to kind of be mindful of in the transition. I can see some Public Service Association representatives in the back of the room, and I'm going to read this verbatim. It's not my opinion. I was asked by them to reflect to you today their sentiments in relation to the change, so I do so now. They're expressed in 3 points. To genuinely thank the Mayor, elected members and senior council officers for the constructive, early and positive engagement with the Public Service Association on this reform, confirming our understanding and support that the proposed reform is not and doesn't become about service reductions and headcount reductions, our interest and willingness to engage and be engaged on this around the future decisions and the implications for members. So I won't speak further to that. I'm just faithfully passing on the sentiment from the Public Service Association as they've expressed it to me. The last thing to repeat from my earlier advice to you is to say that I sincerely hope we can arrive at a definitive decision today that gives staff a degree of clarity and certainty as soon as possible. It is simply unwise from a management and staff relations perspective to leave people in a state of limbo with anxiety over the summer. So I appeal to you to do your best to try and land this today. I just want to step back out of this, and the final thing I'll say is that as much as this discussion is very much on the CCO focus today, it's also a bit easy to forget, frankly, that we're also dealing with the annual plan and budget aspect as part of the proposal. There are cost pressures. There is a sensitivity that we've all got to the economic situation that the community continues to face. But frankly, it's pleasing to be able to say that our starting point, our platform, if you like, financially is pretty solid. We're on target this year. I'm under some pressure, but I'm confident around the savings targets that are in the budget. And while it's open to you, of course, as is appropriate and your democratic prerogative, to fund more, to increase investment in an area, the good thing, the really good thing is that unlike previous years, we're starting from a position of reasonable stability and confidence around our financial position. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Phil. There are staff coming forward for questions.
Chair, can I?
And I've got you down as the first
Yeah,
question.
it's not a question, it's a statement just after what the CEO has said. And I think it's relevant to before we hear from staff, but I'll leave that up to you if you wish me to make the statement of disappointment. I'll leave that to you because I can say it in summing up later.
I want everyone to have a statement, to talk right around the table, everybody at the end of hearing everything. So raise it then. If you've got a disappointment, I'm quite happy to hear it, but I want everybody to have a shot. So we'll go around the table once we've got through questions, and you'll all have a chance to make a statement, okay? I think that's probably the fairest way to do
Yeah,
it.
my statement is based on what I've just heard from the CEO. That's what I'm saying. It's not based because we haven't had anything from staff yet. So, I mean, look, I can say it after this, but I just wanted to make a statement.
I'll just
in
take
regards
advice
to it.
from Sandra, hang on. Okay, I think what I'll do is I'll just go to questions and you can have the first crack of it when we go around the room. Is that all right?
Yeah, no problem, because the statement I'm going to make will not be, and I just wanted to let Sandra know, hopefully that is not my speaking right when we come to the statement I wish to make.
There are probably a few wanting to do that, so what we'll do is we'll go around the room and you can be the first cab off the rank, okay? Thank you, and that will be able to highlight it then. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, so as long as I know, Chair, it is not going to be my speaking right when we get to the item. That's as long as I know that.
You can seek leave to make a personal
I
statement.
can't see
You
that.
can seek leave to make a personal statement, Councillor Philippines, understanding orders.
I was going to do that, John, and the reason I've sort of gone down this track is because I wanted to be sure that Sandra knows understanding orders, that yes, I do want to make a personal statement, but I don't want that to be at the beginning of the debate, which means that I won't be able to speak once I make that statement. Thanks, John.
Point of order, Chair, I'm not sure if it's
I'll exercise my discretion to allow you to make that speaking right at the time and still have your
Raise a
rights to
point of
make a
order.
speech.
Is a point of order?
What? So a point of order now?
Look, I just wondered, I'm not quite sure how this is going to work, but I don't know if standing orders can be suspended briefly to allow Councillor Philippines to make his statement without impacting on his ability to contribute to the subsequent debate that will take place.
That's the best thing to do.
No, you can make a personal
Just move to suspend standing orders.
Well, I don't want this to descend into a squabble at the stage. Please make your statement and we'll move to questions and we'll formalise things after that. But
Chair, the reason I'm making this statement now is because normally in regards to any mayoral proposal, there is an ability for us to ask questions. What I've just heard, and out of respect to you, Phil, I did not interrupt you when you were talking. That's because I do have the respect for you, but my disappointment and my issue is the fact that what you've just explained to us, for me, and it's not your intention, I know that, but basically has ended up, from my perspective, and it may be others around this table, supporting that proposal. You went through everything that was in the agenda around what the staff and you as CEO will do. I would have rather heard from you at the end of the presentation from the staff in regards to what you were going to do, because that's exactly what was in there. And I didn't want to interrupt you, but that is the impression, and that is why I'm so disappointed. I know that wasn't your intention, but from my perspective, it has made your speech supportive with some councillors around. I have no doubt at all. And that is my statement, and I'll just leave it at that. I will talk to the recommendations chair, and I have got questions not only for the staff and your office, your chief of staff, but also for the CEO. Kilda, thank you.
Righto, the people are here, not here making a presentation, they're here to answer questions, so your questions first.
Even questions now?
Yeah, you're the first
Good.
question.
Okay. Firstly, question to the CEO. I am privy to a report that was sent to your office, Phil, and in this letter, there were concerns raised around Māori development, and in regards to that letter that was sent to your office, concerns, I believe, around Māori outcomes. My question to you is how, when I look at the documents I've received, for example, Te Mahere Aronga, which is the Tātaki Auckland Limited Māori Outcomes Plan, and Akina, the annual plan review, how can you assure me that aspects in that letter received, but also in those two reports that I've quoted, how can you assure me that things will be done around Māori outcomes and Māori development that is currently delivered by Tātaki Auckland Limited? That's my first part, and I've got about 4 more.
Thank you, Councillor. And let me preface this by saying I was neither speaking before or against the mayoral proposal. I was simply recognising the fact that there's a substantial staff interest in this, and that was my motivation for talking. But I hear you in terms of your earlier comments. I only recently received the correspondence you've talked to, and we need to formally respond to it. So I also note that point. How can I give that assurance? All I have to stand on is the fact that we've got a substantial commitment to meeting Māori outcomes across the council group, and there are some very good examples of effort success in the Tātaki Auckland Unlimited space. Absolutely, that need to be preserved. The model that we use in simple terms in the council is to, at a group level, have a strategy, kia ora tamaki makaurau, which guides the responsiveness not just of the core council organisation but also of the CCOs. So the commitment that you see represented in that report is aligned to that, and the aspiration is a shared one in terms of how we address Māori outcomes. There is no question of any reduction of resources in the event that it came in, and the model we use in the organisation, and which I'm personally quite committed to, is that we have responsibility and resourcing being taken within every department unit of the organisation, and I don't imagine that changing. We would continue to have a real focus, for example, within the economic development space, since that's what's on the agenda today. There would be an expectation of a plan and the discipline to back it up with the right resources in that area going forward. That is the practice right through the organisation, and it wouldn't be any different through this change process.
Thank you. To Max and Jazz, I know that you both included into that letter. So when we look at Māori outcomes, how would you, and in particular you, Max, through the CEO, how would you ensure that, I'll give you some examples of the Director for Māori Outcomes and the initiatives and partnerships and examples of what's happened. Whaia Te Ao Māori Research Program, Unitary Plan Change, Te Matatini Festival, Autaia Haka Theatre Program, Capability Building Program, installation, look, I can go on and on. How do we ensure that if this goes through, that won't be lost if it comes in-house when it is currently being delivered by the Māori Outcomes Directorate and the small team? Can you give me assurances that initiatives and programs such as the ones I've quoted will not get lost if it comes in-house?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I think we can give you that assurance that should the decisions be made today as proposed, the commitments from the Council and the CCOs to Māori outcomes and to our treaty obligations would not be changed. The resources available to those, as the Chief Executive has just addressed, would not be changed. So, and it would be an integral part of the transition process that we would look at how we enhance and protect the Māori outcomes roles and functions throughout the group through any change.
Max, with the examples, how would you assure that we don't lose what is already getting done? That's what I'm saying. I know you're talking Māori outcomes. I've given you examples of what has been achieved. And that is still going to be my issue. I've spoken to the CEO. That's still going to be my issue. How would you ensure that what's being done at the moment continues if it comes in-house? That's really my question. Is there a setup, or is it something that you'll be doing and looking at all? Sorry, Phil.
I think, in simple terms, Councillor, by preserving the resources that are committed to it now, by honouring the commitments and the plans that are in place, and by doing our damnedest to make sure that the people who are doing that work are brought across and make a successful transition into a changed structure, if you agree to the Mayor's proposal.
Thank you. Chair, sorry, I just need to get that because I've spoken to Max, and Max, I just want to acknowledge you and Tamsin around coming over home just to have a cordial about this particular issue. Max, can you tell me then, and whether it may well come from Jazz, but I'm also concerned around the film industry that is currently with Tātaki Auckland Limited. I, along with many others in Otahuhu, got involved with the Wrecking Crew and the filming that happened there. If it wasn't for Tātaki Auckland Limited or the film screening, the organisation, that would not have come through to Otahuhu. And I know the benefits. How do we again, where will the film industry that's currently in Tātaki Auckland, where will that go? Because I'm one of the councillors of many around this table was in-house, especially at West, and I remember one of my first trips was at West Auckland with the film studio. How do we preserve that? And is it is the film industry one of those that's coming into in-house as the mayoral proposal? I don't know whether that's with you, Jazz, or with Max.
Thank you, Councillor. I can pick that up from what we understand. So we've had dialogue with Screen Auckland, who represent a number in the film industry, and it's actually in two parts. One is a land and buildings part, so film studios themselves, and the other part is around support for the industry for things like permitting and that sort of thing. And so the short answer is that hasn't been decided. That's an implementation issue. Currently, it does sit within the economic development part of TAU, and that function is proposed to come in-house, but Screen Auckland and that activity is a small part of that. In our communications with the industry, they've said that they've got some concerns about where it sits currently and how it is dealt with, and so they would like to see that elevated, and the Mayor and I have committed to meeting with them in January to talk through that in late January.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I'm going to move on over to, and just to my colleagues, look, my apologies about all these pātai, but this concerns me. But look, I want to move to Eke Panuku. Phil, you would know in the Manukau Pōpō, tomorrow's Manukau Pōpō, we had a group that ended up, and I think you formed it yourself, around regenerating Manukau City Council. So I know in reading the paper that there is a move to end up getting industry people in regards to and bringing Eke Panuku. Again, how do we not lose, especially in our ward with Councillor Fully and I, without regeneration that's happening, and what Manukau City Council brought in was land that got sold, that money could be used across the region. How do we lose that regeneration? How do we not lose the experience we have in Eke Panuku that we do right now? And I think of Own Your Own Homes in regards to what Eke Panuku are doing now. How do we not lose that if it comes in-house, especially that experience?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. We fully recognise the value of the specialised knowledge, experience and culture that exists within the current urban regeneration teams at Panuku, and those would be at the would be a forefront of our mind in designing a future state should the governing body decide to bring urban regeneration into the council. So we can provide you with an assurance that if you make that decision today, and the purpose of the Chief Executive's memo earlier on this week around the implementation framework was to provide you with assurance that if you made those decisions, we would implement change thoughtfully, we would prioritise realising the objectives of the change and protecting what works with the current model, including retaining specialist expertise and knowledge, and keeping existing projects in flight, keeping those projects. That includes protecting and strengthening team cultures which foster innovation and have those specialist skills. So we can give you assurance that we understand what we understand the challenge, and that would be a focus. There's no doubt that, and we speak to this in terms of the staff advice on CCO reform, or we looked at the advantages and disadvantages of options, that a decision to transfer the function into the council comes with some risk and some downsides. What we are providing you with assurance of is that we understand those challenges and that we would be committed to implementing the change thoughtfully and with a way to addressing that. So I don't perceive a strong risk that what you're talking about there in Manukau, that we would lose what you're talking about there. In fact, we would be committed to retaining it, and in fact, if where possible, strengthening the council's ability to deliver large-scale place-based projects and integrating different functions to do so.
Before I go to Jazz, can I just clarify one thing with you, Max? I'm not worried about Manukau because it's happening in Manukau. I'm worried about what's happening around Tāmaki Makaurau. That's my question around regeneration, not Manuka. Where it's around the Tāmaki Makaurau. So, sorry, Jess. Just wanted to clarify that.
Councillor, from a mayoral proposal perspective, let me be very clear. Our expectation is not that the service is diminished or the urban regeneration activity is diminished in any way. Our expectation is that it will be enhanced by bringing it together into some functionality within the Auckland Council that brings together the aspects around Council's planning function, economic development activity, looking overall at the funding envelope, etc. Because urban regeneration activity in Eke Panuku, in our view, currently is constrained by funding and other things, and also about the actual disparate activity that happens across infrastructure planning and delivery between the different arms of council group and the policy area. So in particular, I'm talking about how you look at economic development, transport planning, other infrastructure planning like water, etc., and how do you bring that all together to focus in a place-based way. That is the approach that's outlined in the mayoral proposal. And there's been obviously a lot of speculation about people and urban regeneration not happening if it comes into the Auckland Council. That is not our expectation, and I think in the staff advice around implementation framework, they're outlining ways in which you can actually achieve that and make that better. So that is what we expect to see. And we expect to see that the talent that's currently within those organisations is retained and actually sees a role for themselves in the future council, department, division, whatever the construct will be, that they can actually achieve more than what they can at the moment and the restrictions that they have.
Thank you. Two very quick questions. Statement of intent and letters of expectations there. They are done and negotiated with the CCOs, with the governing body, including the mayor, governing body and the CCOs.
Yes, broadly.
Okay. I'm going to move to Auckland Transport, and this question is to you, Chair. I have in front of me a letter that was sent to Auckland Transport, and I want to ask questions, three very quick questions to you. Did you think that letter that went to Auckland Transport directors should have been at least sent to us as well? And that I'm including where you put in here, hence the question to Max and to Jazz. Let me be very clear, this work will be led by Auckland Council Parent. I expect Auckland Transport to cooperate with and follow the directions given by me, the Minister of Transport and Council Chief Executive. Should that have not at least been brought to our attention, Chair, in regards to those letters that were sent? Or Jazz, I might point that question to you.
It was copied to you, and it's a letter from me to the board of directors.
No, I don't know whether it was, but look, I am privy to that because there are some comments in here that one Auckland Council, Jazz, this is why I asked the question. The governing body wasn't even mentioned in this particular letter, and I don't recall receiving this, but I have been forwarded through to me. And there are some aspects in there that I maybe others may be able to, if we can get that letter sent to us individually, that might be a good idea, because there are some concerns and comments made in there, Jazz. If the chair has said that it has been sent, well then I would like you to send that to us. Kilda, thank you. And that's it. I've done, and then I'll my speaking right. Thank you.
Your Worship, sorry, just before we get to further questions, I thought I might, and sorry, Councillor, for not doing this earlier, just a little by way of introduction, explain the role, what I'm here for. So I'm here to answer questions about the staff advice. We prepared a significant volume of advice, which is attached to the Budget Committee's agenda from the 4th of December, which was in response to specific questions that we were asked to advise on and respond, as part of the direction-setting document for the annual plan. So there's that body of work, and then we circulated on Monday a memorandum to the governing body, which addressed the potential implementation of changes. So that's no criticism of you, Councillor. I just wanted to be clear about what I'm here for, is answering questions about that advice, and Jazz, as Mayor's Chief of Staff, is here to answer questions which are explicit about about the Mayor's proposal, should you have those. So if councillors can be clear about who they're asking the question of, as Councillor Filipaina was, that would be
Max,
great.
that's why I just
Yes.
asked the question of Jazz. So I look forward to that letter that was sent to the directors to be sent to the governing body. Kilda.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Simpson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions. First on Panuku, which I think is probably bothering me the most. On the 10th of December, the Mayor and all councillors got a letter from David Kennedy, the Chair of Eki Panuku. And in that letter, his main point was around international experience for urban generation as a specialist function is best managed by a dedicated team with some independence from election cycles. In other words, he was worried about the continuity and political interference that could happen, as opposed to best practice, which he says is by a dedicated team. Now, in the staff advice we got, which is a shame it's actually not on this agenda, it was part of the budget, but anyway, there was a suggestion that you would, that the Mayor, as part of this proposal, would have an independent board, team, committee / people. Is that still your understanding that that would happen? So we could feel confident that the concern that Chair Kennedy was raising would be delivered as far as that independence?
I'll start, and Max can, obviously, as I've said, we will do with the CCOs collaboratively a piece of work over the next 2 months to get the design right in the event that you decide to go down this path. My thinking is that we will have a very clear and dedicated focus on urban regeneration within the structure if you make the decision, and I do believe that some sort of advisory board mechanism where we can harness the expertise of some external people to give it direction is probably a very good idea in terms of dealing with the risk that's reflected in Chair Kennedy's letter.
Yeah, look, I don't have a whole lot to add other than that we did, as part of the advice, look at international experience and models. We didn't find necessarily support for the proposition that Chair Kennedy has put in his letter without any sort of examples he's referring to. So what we found was that around the world there are examples of regeneration entities that are separated from councils, and examples where regeneration is done inside council, and there are successful examples in both instances. And it's hard to make those international comparisons because the context is always different in terms of the level of central government involvement. But we would, should this change happen, we would be looking hard at those international models to understand what is successful and what isn't. But there isn't, there's no clear trend either way based on our research.
Jazz, I'm going to give this one to you, because for me, I just want a yes or no answer, because I think that level of independence is important. So, and I have talked to you about this. So, do you support some level of independence around this, independent committees?
So the answer is yes, Deputy Mayor, and we have seen that successfully implemented in other place-based urban regen from the likes of Britomart, etc.
Great, thank you. My second question is around point 54 in the Mayor's proposal, which is again about Eki Panuku. And it says, whilst the delivery of these services via a CCO enables a focused, more long-term view with commercial negotiations at arm's length, it also lacks the capital and property to undertake large-scale projects. Could you help me understand how the new model would change that? In other words, would provide the capital and property to undertake large-scale projects and not just the smaller-scale projects?
So the intention around that is currently Eki Panuku operates with a line of credit essentially from council, and then is looking to divest properties in order to further reinvest. Our belief is that in a place-based approach, that you look at all of the other council investment that would be dedicated to that. So you're looking at transport investment, water investment, and any other sort of community facilities-based investment in a more holistic way, rather than just Eki Panuku trying to leverage what they've got left in their budget to achieve placemaking or whatever it is. So we think that it'll be more of an integrated approach to actual regeneration activity.
Thank you. And my third question is just backing up Councillor Filipaina on the Screen Auckland. Did I hear correctly that the answer to Screen Auckland would come in February? You're not opposed to leaving Screen Auckland where it is that correct?
Yes, so the conversation is that we're actually having to talk to Screen Auckland, and even they themselves don't know where they think that would sit best. And so they have a few ideas, but we want to have that conversation with them before we move into implementation planning.
Thank you. And my final question, Chair, is just in general. So far the justification for the CCO reform has largely been based on principles, better democratic accountability, strategic alignment across the council group, and decision-making and efficiency. I'm keen in this public arena to ask what evidence or what work has been undertaken that if we vote for this package of reform, performance and delivery will actually be better across all elements.
That's a question for me, Deputy Mayor.
Because, you know, that's what this is all about, right? If it's not going to be better, it needs to be better or it shouldn't happen. So how will the delivery of this actually make it better across all those elements?
So, Deputy Mayor, it's a good question, obviously. No, I'm just trying to be a bit balanced in my answer here, because we haven't made specific recommendations about the change, and we're not advising either way, but we are giving advice on the pros and cons. What I can say is that the Mayor has articulated in his proposal some objectives that he would seek to, he would be seeking to obtain through integration of urban regeneration functions into the council, including the ones you've referred to, and the ones that the Chief of Staff just mentioned around integrating the planning and delivery functions around place-based projects, and our ability as a council, strengthening our ability as a council to deliver it at scale and pace for larger scale regeneration projects. From a staff perspective, we believe that those objectives are, good objectives to seek, and we think that we through implementation of these reforms, we would be able to obtain some of those benefits while managing the risks and downsides of the potential downsides, I should say, of the model. So we are confident in our ability to implement that change in a way that will make things better, acknowledging that there are risks in that. So I'm just trying to thread a needle here a little bit, Deputy Mayor, but I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, okay. And finally then, while I know the purpose is not directly to save money, my committee's got to find another 47 million. So what projections have you got that these reforms will represent good value for money, and what savings might we get in the long term?
Well, we don't, the purpose of the change, as we understand it, is not to make cost savings. And we think that's actually, that's a positive place to be, because it means we can focus on enhancing our capabilities and getting better outcomes fundamentally from what we're putting in. So there are superficially there will be cost savings from integrating a function into council because of overhead costs reduction, and then an ability to potentially reinvest that in the function. But that's not the essential driver of this change. The driver of the change is achieving those objectives we just spoke about.
If I might, there's one aspect referenced in the Mayor's proposal that does relate to the shared services direction across the group, and there is high-level business casing that does indicate a level of savings to be achieved, and that's within our thinking around that savings program, Deputy Mayor.
It's also important to point out that a lot of this will provide savings for some of the people who apply to get our services as well. Currently, there are a lot of complaints, particularly from large Maori developers and others, that we send them through far too many doors. Okay, thank you for those questions. Councillor Sayers, please.
Thank you. My questions goes probably towards in that more than transitional plan space, and it's to do with Eki Panuku's, I guess, property management functions more than rejuvenation functions, and our own Auckland Council property management functions. Just for context, my impression as we've gone through workshops is that the Auckland Council property services aren't a division as such. I think, and I may be wrong, but it seems to be dispersed amongst different divisions. So I just really want a reassurance. My question's around a reassurance that through the transition that the property asset management plans, because I think we're quite good at it with new builds, but I'm not so sure because it's dispersed and we don't have a dedicated property division that our ongoing asset management plans for existing and old property assets is within an asset management plan. So it's just a reassurance that that will be looked at as part of the transitional process, that there's no holes left if they do exist at the moment or not, but certainly a reassurance that that will exist.
Yes, it will, and it would in any event, regardless of the change. We have a focus on improved asset management generally, and a recently created Centre of Excellence in a unit within Council to bring a consistent discipline across asset management portfolios, property included. To the wider point, there are opportunities for some more synergy between the different parts of this. We do have corporate property sitting separately to community property, sitting separately to the Eke Panuku property portfolio, and. So there is an opportunity here.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fully, please.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair, and many of my questions have been asked by others before me, but I do have some questions, one for you, Phil, and also questions on Tātaki Auckland Unlimited and Eke Panuku. Phil, you said, there will be, we can't avoid some job losses, and you estimated that would be about 3%, I think, in your...
No, just I'll be really clear on this. I didn't anticipate job losses at all, or at least an absolute desire to minimise them. The 3% number was a reflection of the number, the head count of people directly affected by this change in, as a percentage of the total overall workforce. Okay. So we're talking about moving in the region of 3% of total council workforce here. So I was putting it into that context. That is not a job losses for a figure.
Good. But in terms of any job losses you might think may happen out of this, do you have a number in mind? Are you able to give that kind of an estimate, or is it too early in the piece?
It's too early and needs to be, it's a function of the detailed design, what the management structures look like, and in a wider sense in terms of talent retention, who wants to come across and be part of the new arrangement in the event that it's agreed today.
Kia ora. All right, thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. A question then about Tātaki Auckland Unlimited, because I've heard a few times now people saying that we're not really sure what Screen Auckland's position is, but I received a letter from the chair and a letter from one of the board members, and it seems pretty clear. And what they've said in that letter, and I think all councillors received that, Screen Auckland was designed to be a partner to the council, not part of it. And they're worried because they need that flexibility and agility in the industry to be able to make decisions quickly, and they don't want to be bogged down as a sub-part of a department within a big organisation like council. So I just want to clarify in terms of the independence that Screen Auckland are wanting to retain, because that seems to be what, there's no fogginess about that. They want some independence, they want to be independent of council. Can you guarantee that they will retain that independence if this fusion happens, if they come in-house?
I can
Was
pick
that
that
not
up,
been
Mr.
worked
Chair.
out either?
Yeah, so that's something that we are quite keen to talk to them about. They weren't themselves very sure about where in the council organisation they think they fit best. And so for us, it's a conversation with them about what that model looks like and how the requirement for that industry is best met through the council organisation.
Okay, all right. And then just finally, some questions about the Eke Pānuku model, and I tautoko all the questions that were asked by our Deputy Mayor and also by Matua Filipaina. But I want to ask a bit more detail around the local board governance, because that was part of the kōrero during our workshops, is that there will be more governance for local boards. And I know that local boards want that. They want to have more say in terms of the work that's being done in their areas in the regeneration space, you know. So can I ask what that would look like? What decisions would sit with local boards and what decisions would sit with us as a governing body? And in particular, one of the big bugbears around, or one of the few bugbears around Eke Pānuku and CCOs in general, but especially Eke Pānuku, is when there are asset sales in a local board area, for example, Manukau, that money is not ring-fenced to then be used in that local board area. That money goes to the bucket that helps to regenerate spaces right across Tāmaki Makaurau. That's all good, but will this mean that the local boards will have governance over that money? So if a car park that Sir Barry Curtis bought in the 1980s for the future of Manukau is sold in Manukau, and I'm thinking of a specific car park, and that generates millions of dollars, will that come under the governance of the local board, and can the local board be assured they can keep that money, use it for a transform or unlock project within their local board rohe?
Maybe just before Max comments, I think we've got to be clear on there are two scenarios here, and they're quite different in terms of where the proceeds of property sales go. You have a Eke Pānuku administering a range of property sales mandated through the long-term plan, and the proceeds of that principally come into the corporate account, not to the local board. There is a discussion, obviously, about whether that is the most effective way of going about that, and whether local boards might be, if you like, incentivised to look at those property sales differently in the event that some or all of the proceeds came their way. There is a different scenario around the urban regeneration component where property sales in the immediately affected area for the transform and unlock projects they are recycled into the outcomes, urban regeneration outcomes in that area, and therefore the local board has a more direct interest in it. I don't know if Max wants to comment further.
Yeah, look, I think all I'd add is that the issue of the allocation of responsibilities between local boards and the governing body, should you make the decision to bring urban regeneration in-house, will be something that will have to come back to the governing body for a decision prior to the change coming into effect. So it would be something that would be considered carefully through the transition process, and then that would result in explicit recommendations coming to the governing body for decision. Noting that one of the objectives is to enhance the local board decision making, and I think we just need to we'll need to think about how to do that in a way that also preserves, there is a need to maybe make some prioritisation at a regional level about where the regional funds go for larger scale urban regeneration projects. So there'll still, I think, be a regional prioritisation process, but with some enhanced local decision making. And the exact line of that would be something we would come back to the governing body on.
Okay, kia ora. All right, thank you.
Councillor Darby next, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, staff. Hey, just at the outset, so we know that this is on Ekapanuku. We know that Ekapanuku is meeting its KPIs. We know that it's winning multiple awards, architecture awards, landscape architecture awards, professional body awards like Best Marina Operator in 2022 and back in, I think, 2018 as well. We know that it has staff performance feedback that exceeds the core council, and I acknowledge the chief executive saying that, and that our staff performance results have really lifted in the last quarter. But I am very aware that that has been the trend at Ekapanuku for a long time, that it has been extremely high, which indicates a strong culture has always been there. It's not just arriving, it's been there. So given that, what is the fundamental problem? And they are delivering on what we ask them, and that's clear. So just give me the nub of the problem. Give me the nub of the problem if all those things are being satisfied.
So the mayoral proposal and what the mayor has outlined is looking for how do we actually make sure this activity happens in a, how would I describe, in a more supercharged way across Auckland rather than just focused on those limited bits of activity that Ekapanuku are currently focused on. So I take your point. Ekapanuku and the staff there do a good job with the limited bit that they are given. But what the mayor proposal is trying to achieve is look at how do we achieve that in a coordinated way across the Auckland region, which actually delivers more broadly in those areas that already have some funding and can go better, rather than Ekapanuku competing and coming to you with a bunch of ideas about, okay, we've completed this, now we're going to recycle some capital, and here's 2 or 3 areas that you can choose from because they think they've got some properties that may work in that space.
Okay, so you've got this entity, you've got that problem, you've defined your part of the problem, succeeding in other areas, and it's good to have that acknowledgement, Jazz, good to hear that. So you've defined the problem, and how did you apply the solution to the problem to the current entity? So you've already got an entity. It's dangerous. We all know it's dangerous to just pull the rug on an entity and try and solve it elsewhere. First of all, you look at the entity. So tell me how you looked at the entity to find the solution.
So, Councillor, I think we looked at this from a principles basis and from the model perspective. So this wasn't about the entity, and it was never about the performance of the entity. The idea was to look at the functions performed by each organisation, and from a functional perspective, looking across then about the LTP and how do you deliver those services that you've promised to deliver to Aucklanders, is where best we think those functions could sit in the council organisation in order to deliver against the promises in the RTP. So that was the original thinking that went behind the mayoral proposal. That's what the advice was asked for. And so then looking at the functionality as outlined in the proposal, it's some of the issues come from the fact that there is less coordination and integration between the different areas and functionality in council's activities. So that includes transport planning, infrastructure planning generally, the activity that Ike Panuku does in urban regeneration, funding overall, and then also looking at council's own planning and land use functionality. So what the Mayor has proposed is to bring that functionality in-house in order to make sure that it is integrated and coordinated across all of council's other activity in order to achieve better outcomes in that space. And really to the Deputy Mayor's question now as well, is what we expect those services and that activity to be performed better, because the non-structural part of the mayoral proposal around CCO reform is how do we then look at what the performance objectives are and how do we make sure that those are appropriate and deliver against the democratically set objectives, which will happen once all of those things are in-house.
Can I add just to that from staff perspective? So we didn't, just in terms of our approach, we didn't tackle the problem as a review of the entities themselves. How well have they performed? What's, you know, explicitly around the CCO. Actually, we looked at it from a kind of system perspective. How is the model performing for the council group? And so we looked at urban regeneration or large-scale place-based projects that the council's involved in as the broader scope of functions that are relevant to what Ike Panuku does. So the council is involved in a number of large-scale place-based projects which Ike Panuku is not involved in. You know, actually the large-scale projects are much larger than Ike Panuku's projects. And so we looked at, well, if in terms of the problem definition that you're talking about, what some of the problem is a lack of integration between what the council is doing and what the CCOs are doing sometimes in those larger scale projects. So there is, you know, whether this is the, you know, whichever step you take, there is a problem here, which is that we need to strengthen the council's ability, council group's ability to respond to those large scale challenges that we have around how we grow and how we grow in a way that lifts living standards and creates good places for people to live and work.
Thanks. You talk about we looked. Who is the we, and what is the respective experience of the we in understanding the place of a regeneration agency for Auckland? I mean, I'm just a bit concerned that there seems to be, you've looked around the world, you said. Is that a desktop look around the world, or did you go to academics and experts in this field? I'd really like to understand the expertise, because look, Max, I know you're an experienced lawyer, but you're not a regeneration expert. Jazz, you've got massive experience in the financial area, but neither of you are regeneration experts. We have a focused entity on regeneration right now that is meeting all its targets that this governing body asks of it. So and there are experts there. There are experts at universities. There are experts in the private sector. There are experts internationally. I'd like some assurance that that has been tapped into and it is not just a desktop by the executive management at Auckland Council, because it appears to be that for me at the moment.
Well, it's not just, it certainly wasn't undertaken by the executive management of Auckland Council, separate, you know, by ourselves. There was, we had a task given to us with, 8 weeks perhaps to resolve it. We tapped into the very significant experience the council has in overseeing the work of Eke Panuku, and in reviewing and establishing Eke Panuku, and in developing and delivering on place-based work in urban regeneration projects, which the council has significant experience and knowledge about. So we looked at that. We engaged very actively and collaboratively with Eke Panuku in their expertise, and received feedback from them several times through this process. And we did speak with a number of outside players and experts, but we would, just in terms of the time frames we were given, this wasn't a process which enabled us to make it too expansive in terms of where we went with that. But we had a number of conversations with experts in the field, and we did research, research on urban regeneration models, and that was desktop. Now that wasn't completed by me; it was completed by staff who have experience in urban regeneration.
You stress that it has been time constrained. If you had more time, could you have gone to some of the places that I've just mentioned to garner more information, like find out what the best model might be? You've emphasised the time constraint on at least 2 or 3 occasions there, Max.
Yeah, look, there are benefits to the limited amount of time, though. So what I would really stress is that there is a premium on getting to certainty through this process. With more time, we could have done more work. There's no question, but that would have prolonged the period of uncertainty, and the longer that goes on, the greater the risk is to disruption and to retention of staff and to retention of progress. So, if you made this decision to go, well, either way, frankly. But certainly if you made a decision to bring urban regeneration into council, the next phase of the project, and we refer to it an implementation project, implementation framework, would involve what you describe, which is looking internationally further, looking at some of the models, particularly the ones which are in-house, which have been successful. An example would be in Brisbane. Brisbane has a highly successful urban regeneration program that's been delivered by the Brisbane City Council, by a specialist unit within the council. So that would be, we would look for those international examples and look to build on them. And the next phase, had we had more time, we could have done that earlier. But I just caution you on the risks actually that would be entailed in delaying a decision.
Isn't that about face though? Doing that after you make the primary decision, you're boxing yourself in. You've already taken the new direction, and I'm surprised to hear that, Max. I mean, I appreciate your honesty there, that it has been time constrained, and to take that, there is no implementation plan at the moment, right? But there's an implementation framework. I am very surprised to hear you say that you would undertake that second step as a second step, not as the first step.
I think
what I'm saying, Councillor,
not to be argumentative here, but I'm surprised you're surprised, because the direction was that which was given by the governing body to take the initial direction and provide staff advice about it to the extent we could in the time frame.
Yeah, I disagree. I absolutely disagree. Just in terms of the, there's been some assurance given that everything will work out in terms of staff, etc. What is the cost of losing talent? So we're dealing with an entity which has quite specific expertise. I'd like to understand what is the cost of redundancy, loss of talent, and the impact that would have going forward e.g. loss of momentum. So that's one question in terms of lost talent. I'd also like to understand the other risk that I identify, and I'm sure you do, Max, in terms of the loss of commercial relationships. I won't name the commercial partners that Eke Panuku has, but they've been nurtured over a long time. What is your understanding of the risk in that area as well? So there's just two strands there, please.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. So you're right that those are risks. We are confident in our ability to manage those risks through thoughtful implementation of any transition, and that which would prioritise retaining the specialist expertise and unique culture, which enables Eke Panuku's to succeed where it has done. So this council is experienced at managing change successfully, and we are confident in our ability to do that. We've acknowledged those risks in the paper that you've got, and we've set out the key mitigations that we would take to address them. I'm not sure I can take it much further.
One of those, and this is my final question, I'll allow others. One of those parts of the Eke Panuku organisation is the independent governance, and they have some highly skilled individuals there, and then there's the suggestion that there be an advisory panel, almost sort of doing that job. Directors are accountable by law, company law. They're liable. They're not just advisors. They sit there in a totally different role. Can you just tell me, on the advisory panel that you're recommending, what is the responsibility of a panel member and what is the accountability of a panel member compared with a professional director?
Well, thank you for the question, Councillor. It's an element of detail which we would work through in implementation. So advisory or expert advisory panel is something which I think the Chief Executive has pointed out. He does see as part of a future state should this decision be made. You're right. There's a difference between that and having it in a separate company, which has pros and cons. So one of the downsides of having it in a separate company with directors which have specific duties is that it reinforces silos, but which we need to work every day to try and manage. For example, just in terms of a day-to-day challenge that we face is that if as a member of the council staff, you're talking to a staff member from a CCO, often unable to talk before having gone to their board because their board has those explicit duties. And that is one of the challenges that we have in implementing the CCO model successfully. We have ways of addressing it and mitigating it, but that's not a challenge you have with an advisory board because the advisory board doesn't have those explicit director duties. The duties of the advisory board would be around oversight and advice to the governing body and to the executive of the council. There are legacy councils that had that model in place, which Auckland City Council is an example of that had an enterprise property board managing the regeneration projects or advising on the regeneration projects and property from the former Auckland City Council.
But just finally, advisory board, there's no specifics around that. That's just a concept at the moment. It's like the implementation plan. It doesn't exist. There's an implementation framework, which is just a box chart.
To be fair, Councillor, we've explained, and the Chief Executive explains in the memo, the limitations to what we can provide in terms of detail. We have obligations to staff and a commitment from a chief executive to engage collaboratively with the CCOs to design any future state should you make the decision. And we take that commitment very seriously, and so we are avoiding giving you very specific undertakings about what the future state would look like, because that would be fundamentally at odds with that commitment to and our obligations. So we this is a balancing act where we're trying to provide you with an idea of and examples and the process, what the future state could look like without being too specific. But there are examples where those advisory boards have been used both in New Zealand with the legacy councils and in international models successfully.
I'll leave it there, and thank you, Max, Jazz, and back to you, Matt.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hills, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and just want to acknowledge, first of all, the movement of destination and major events, which was a big push by many of us not to stay with Tātaki. So just want to acknowledge that and thank you. On the screen, and I don't want to keep going around in circles, I guess I've heard there is some difference of opinion of that, but I believe it should be independent. But what you're saying is that Screen Auckland decision through implementation, it'll be decided with the sector? Like, will you try and build majority support for keeping it with Tātaki or moving it? Is that how that's going to roll out? Because it's not specific in our decisions.
Yes is the answer to that question.
Can I just come up a couple of times? Screen Auckland is not independent. It's a part of the council group in a CCO. So yes, as part of a CCO, it may enjoy a sort of a greater degree of operational flexibility, but it's certainly not independent of the council. It's part of and funded by the council.
So would you? I mean, that comment means that everything.
Well, it's just the word independent. So I wanted to just clarify that. So I'm not contradicting what Jazz said, which is that there would be a process of working with the screen industry and with Tātaki around where that should fit within the council group. But it isn't an independent organisation at the moment.
I guess I was just echoing
and that
this.
is, I don't mean to be pedantic, but
I guess I was just echoing the submissions we've had. So
yes, I know they do use that word.
Yeah. On Auckland Transport, and look, I was very supportive of the general thrust of the original approach, which is around policies, planning, strategy into council. I think for too long we've hid behind it's everyone else's fault. But I do want to understand, and maybe it's from Jazz, because I think we've had a few different updates of what exactly the RTC and the Road Controlling Authority is meant to look like. I know that will come later, but just for peace of mind, what is our understanding? Because in my opinion, it does feel like suddenly a lot of government control potentially over what they don't currently have. But if you want to explain what your understanding of the legislation is on this is for Jazz, on both the RTC and also our regional controlling side of things.
So there's a couple of differences in that. So in terms of the road controlling authority, so that's the status that Auckland Transport currently has. We will need to see what the drafting around the legislation looks like, but the intention through the announcement was that Auckland Council would become the road controlling authority, and then the view around the allocation and delegation of the different aspects of decision making around that particular point will need to be worked out. So that's not clear at the moment, but the intention is that Auckland Council will become the road controlling authority. In relation to the Regional Transport Committee, or the Auckland Regional Transport Committee, TC, the announcement is that that would be jointly appointed, so Auckland Council would have elected member appointments on the RTC. The Minister would have appointments on the RTC, but being very clear that the role of that would be to promulgate the Auckland Integrated Transport Plan, which is a 30-year plan, but also the Regional Land Transport Plan. The activity would be supported by Auckland Council and obviously the transport organisation as well, and then the decision around the RLTP will be made by Auckland Council. So that's what has been announced so far, and that is what we expect to happen.
But your understanding of implementation and over time, that will be largely this group, like us, governance, not necessarily this Crown Council. It does seem like something that other councils aren't made to do, is a significant amount of government kind of oversight throughout a term, as opposed to on the long-term planning. That's what I can't understand.
I wonder if there are aspects of this that we might return to and discuss in more depth in a different forum, but there is a difference between the Regional Transport Committee notion that's been envisaged as part of this change that the Mayor and Minister announced and what exists elsewhere in local government. Principally, the idea that there's a 10-year view of the infrastructure investment, an alignment between government and ourselves across a longer-term time frame. So they're actually governing an entirely different thing, and it's making real the notion of the integrated transport plan that we've been pursuing for some time. It's probably the key point here, I think, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. On the extra governance, and I know I've spoken about this before, how do we ensure that the assumption of democratic governance doesn't just become staff delegations? Not saying there's anything wrong with staff delegations, but through this process, what's the expectation? And second of all, and I will speak about this later, the capacity for this group of, and maybe it's a question for Jazz or the Mayor, because it's slightly more political. We have an issue with councillors turning up currently. We also have issues with workshops being declined because of time. What do we do to ensure that if far more decisions are coming to council, we have a structure that either enables the time or is more responsibility for councillors to be, how do we make it more transparent around reporting on workshop attendance or meetings? I don't know what that looks like, but I want to know what the structure looks like if we're suddenly making far more decisions, because that's the expectation, and I imagine some people wonder how we will do that when there's 6 or 7 people in a room at other meetings.
Well, I'm not sure how you get more people along, because yesterday, of course, there was a very poor attendance at the workshop you held. That's not associated with this. In terms of where this is going, I'm hoping that by integrating things, we'll get better results within the council, so there'll be less need for us to squabble over bits and pieces. It should be a better production of what comes out. I'm aiming this at a better result for the ratepayers, not necessarily an easier or harder result for us. There will be more responsibility in our system. We do accept responsibility from other people's decisions quite a lot. Somebody came up with the idea, some group of experts came up with the idea that there would be $180 million worth of land sales resulting from the Mount Eden railway station, and that's proved to be very expensive error in judgment for us. So, which we will have to sort out. So, I think that difficulties concentrate the mind. Everyone's here today.
And maybe from Jazz or Phil, will we expect some sort of reset either next year or on a new council term of expectations or higher expectations because there's going to be a lot more work. Yeah, I'm just wondering how we transfer that governance.
So, Mr. Chair, if I can just pick up the point, I think there's two different things here. One is about attendance, which is not something I'm going to comment on, but the other is about the workload, and I've heard this comment a number of times. My observation is that you already have that workload because there is a lot of duplication, as the Mayor was saying, in terms of decision making. A lot of that comes to you from the CCOs several times, and you are going backwards and forwards in a ping pong in terms of giving advice or giving direction and receiving stuff and going backwards and forwards. Our expectation is that you'll cut a number of those steps out, so you'll have a clearer view of the decisions that you want to make as elected members, and those decisions that can be made at a organisational, functional level. So that's what I would expect to see, and we would think that direction of travel from today in terms of decision you make and the organisational structure that then exists will drive a little bit of the decision-making structure in the future.
Thank you. And down to some of the implementation, I do understand that you need consultation with staff, so you can't just lay everything out on the table, because that's the improper way to do things. But is it my understanding, Phil, that you will be taking whatever happens today? So, my opinion, if Eke Panuku move forward, the expectation it stays together, not just split across. Are those the kinds of ways you'll be consulting with staff about how they see their current work, and not necessarily personalities, because personalities change, but the function and roles? You're going to be trying to keep them as homogenous teams or delivery arms or whatever that looks like, so it doesn't dilute what they do?
As a sort of principle, yes, I think that we want to have the expertise sort of concentrated in an area so that we maintain a focus, e.g. on urban regeneration. The process will be that if you endorse the Mayor's proposal, we will work on the design through to the end of February. At that point, it goes to staff as a starting suggestion for consultation purposes, and it gets refined with that input. So that's kind of the sequence of things.
Thank you. And maybe this one is to Jazz or Max, just on Eke Panuku and their delivery. It's not a secret that I've had really good experiences with Eke Panuku, and it has been conflicting and ever-changing political decisions that have delayed or changed things. How can I be confident I can tell community, say in Northcote and Takapuna, when we're halfway through processes, how can I give confidence that the expectations people have had are going to continue, as opposed to just all the pebbles up in the air all over again?
Through the chair, look, I think we've been very, very clear through this whole process is that we are not expecting anything to change in the work program. Nothing in the LTP that's been promised will be cut. That's not part of any of the Mayor's proposals. And look, I've heard a number of things about the Eke Panuku staff. I do expect that the vast bulk of them, if not all of them, will transition into whatever the organisation is that is delivering this activity. So I still believe that we will deliver that in an enhanced way, and I think that you should have confidence in that, and we certainly have confidence in Phil and his executive to be able to drive a good outcome in that space.
Councillor Ferry, please.
Thank you. My first question is a process one to you, Chair. I'm keen that we look at using Standing Order 1.5.4 to take this in parts. I know you have talked about this being a whole proposal, but I think there are some differences of opinions on particular parts. And I would hate to see the whole thing fail because we can only vote the whole thing up or down. I think there's some real merit, so I'd like that to be considered. That's Standing Order 1.5.4. And then my questions for staff. One of the things that and a lot of the questions I had have already been asked and answered, which is really good. One of the things I want to understand a little bit better is that interface, and Councillor Foley started to ask these questions, but I want to take a little bit further in terms of that interface with local board decision making. And I guess I'm particularly thinking about where there is actually a regional or sub-regional role to the project or the area that's being covered, in particular the city centre. So how we might see that working with Eke Panuku. As much as I agree with empowering local boards, it might not be appropriate to expect the Waitemata local board to pick up responsibility for decision making around all of the complex projects and parts of the city centre, whereas say, and I'm not picking on you in particular, Andy, but you know the Franklin local board, it may well be within their remit and their workloads and stuff to pick up Pukekohe. So the city centre has a very different scale. It has the city centre advisory panel, it has the city centre master plan. How will that be recognised as being a different sort of development scale and in a new structure? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's an excellent point. I think any new structure would need to acknowledge that the city centre is different, and we don't anticipate, at the moment, a number of the city centre projects are dealt with regionally. There's some of those projects are delivered by council, some are delivered by Eke Panuku, some are delivered by Auckland Transport, City Rail Link Limited, and some are delivered by Watercare. There is potentially a benefit in bringing at least the Eke Panuku and the council part of that into one organisation. We've already moved towards an approach where Eke Panuku is the lead agency and we're co-locating those staff together, and I think that's been positive. But this would take that, this would take that a step further. So that doesn't answer your question. To answer your question, I think we're aware of that issue. I think we referred to it in the staff advice that if you brought this in house, you'd probably make a different allocation of responsibilities with respect to the city centre and whatever is the new urban regeneration unit or place-based unit within the council would have a specific set of responsibilities relating to the city centre.
And so, thanks for that. Sort of follow on from that, I guess we would need to think about what the political oversight of that is, because it isn't setting up an advisory panel like we might for some of the other ones that includes representation from the local board as being the primary political oversight. There's going to have to be more to it than that.
That's right. We have a city centre advisory panel already, and I think we'd probably look to utilise that. Look at strengthening it potentially if required. And I think the feedback that the advisory panel is given on the reform, I think quite carefully, not trying to advocate one way or another for which option, but very clear that they would like the council to get itself sorted so it has a kind of and more coordinated, so there's a sort of single point of contact for the city centre, that lead agency approach. And so I think there's benefits if we can get there.
Sorry.
Yeah. So no, look, I think there are different options. I think I know where you're going here, but I'm trying to be a bit careful. There'll be a number of options we'll need to work through. We're acknowledging that the city centre will require a special approach. Yeah.
Cool. That's helpful. Thank you. My other questions have already been asked, so I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, the next question is Councillor Henderson. I've got 4 more and there'll probably be more arriving. It's 1 o'clock and there is a lunch prepared. Do you want to risk hanging on until we get through all the questions?
Oh, I've got about 7 or 8, Mayor,
would
so
you
if we
rather?
go for lunch, that'd be fine with me. Yeah.
Are you happy to?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, that's fine. Yeah.
Well, in this case, it's right on 1. We're going to reconvene at 1:30 and Shane Henderson will start off with a question. Thank you. Beg your pardon?
I'll wait here.